Previously on The Way of Kings.
Nope, sorry, I'm not hiring you. A bit of surprise drama. I was 100% assuming that Shallan was gonna win Jasnar over by doing something a bit snarky, and then Jasnar would be all like, "You got moxie, kid."
Now Lee on The Way of Kings.
Hello, I'm on holiday. Look how rustic it is. Look, beams. Look at the door. Oh, holiday. It's a farm. I'm staying on a farm. It's called Wibble Farm. It's called Wibble Farm. Come over here to my little place. It's lovely and peaceful here on Wibble Farm, so I thought what I'd do is get another chapter of The Way of Kings read, because if you're somewhere rustic, that's a great time to read some fantasy, because you're surrounded by things like trees. There's some trees. Look, hang on. Look, trees. And birds and stuff, you can hear them in the background, and sheep. So why don't we have another chapter of The Way of Kings, this time chapter 7. Anything reasonable. As this project has gone on, I've been hearing from other people who've read the book and, looking at some reviews and things like that, and I've found that some people found Shallan's story to be a little bit superfluous to the main story. I didn't find that to be the case at all. I found it was a good little balance, like how gammon, gammon? It's quite a salty sort of meat, so it's good to have some bits of pineapple with it to sort of balance things out. Kaladin's terrible circumstances are the salt, and then Shallan's lovely magic story, that's the sweetness that goes with it. Now, it's not a sweet and lovely story, that I just think that like magical stones and magic and things are themselves lovely, but there's plenty of what's the word I'm looking for? Adversity. There's plenty of adversity in Shallan's story, and we're going to see some of it soon, but it'll always be the relief to me because it's magic, and that's a nice thing to read about. That's kind of what I wanted to read about when I went into this, so let's do that, shall we? So Shallan is trying to become Jasnar Kholin's ward, if you remember, and Jasnar turned her down. And we sort of expected that Jasnar would, have her mind changed by the end of the chapter, but she didn't, so Shallan's on her own. She's wandering around in this city of bells trying to figure out what to do with herself because she can't very well go home because she's got this quest. Remember? And I didn't spoil what the quest was, and I'm not going to now, although inevitably it's going to come out. Will you please just read this book along with me? And we start to hear about Shallan's backstory here, although not enough to really, fully give it away, just enough to pique our interest. Her father was a disliked sort of a person, we find, skilled in some form of political arts that sort of, gained him standing and social standing and debts. He was able to convince people to loan him money by the sound of things, but he wasn't so good at paying it back, which is weird because he was a wealthy person, because he kept discovering marble deposits on land that he owned. And what's strange is that every time one of those marble deposits was depleted, he magically found another one. With the help of his surveyor, of course. It would be extremely suspicious if he just stumbled upon it himself, but people should have been suspicious anyway, because when I said that he magically kept finding them, well, that turns out to be the case, because Shallan's father had a soulcaster, exactly like the one that Jasnar has on her hand. Exactly like that one, but not working anymore. Something terrible has happened. We know that Shallan's father is dead, and it seems like whatever happened to him on that day, his soulcaster broke. Still looks fine, still looks the same, just doesn't work anymore. We learn that there's this advisor close to Shallan's father, who was called Luesh, and he was taught how to use this soulcaster. And so he was able to determine that even after it was fixed by a jeweler, it didn't work anymore, which shows that it's not, soulcasters aren't just what happens if you put those jewels together. There's something else going on to make it into a soulcaster, Fabriel, which apparently the jeweler who fixed this one was not in any position to recreate. So where do the Fabriels come from is what I want to know. They don't come from jewelers, and jewelers don't know how to make them and don't know who to contact, I guess, to get them made. Anyway, this Luesh was trained to use the soulcaster, and so he is able to, confirm that it doesn't work anymore. So they're stuck. The whole family, which now consists of Shallan and her brothers, there seems to be a few brothers, but they're completely stuck now. Their father was the source of all of their income and wealth, and they were a wealthy family, and now, they have to pay back these debts at some point, but they can't. What with? So they've come up with their plan. But it isn't much of a plan at this point. Shallan doesn't know how she's going to pull it off, and once she does pull it off, how is she going to sort of cover her tracks? She just doesn't know. She has to wing it, but it's very important that she gets it right. Oh dear. And so we head to somewhere called the Vale. Now this is within the great big sort of cut into the stone palace complex type area that we've already been in, where the boulder fell and trapped the granddaughter of the king and Jasnar magicked it away. And a key place in that complex is called the Palanium, or the Pallanium, or the Palaneum. And on the way there you head through these giant, intricate, ornate doors, which I feel as if Brandon takes a moment to sort of misdirect our attention away from here. So this may simply be a bit of sort of detail that he wanted to put in to sort of liven up his world and fluff it up, but just to concentrate on it for a moment in case it turns out to be important, Shallan couldn't help but admire the beauty of the doors. Their exterior was carved in an intricate geometric pattern with circles and lines and glyphs. It was some kind of chart, half on each door. There was no time to study the details, unfortunately, and she passed them by. You see what I mean about that last part? It's almost like saying, pay no attention to this chart behind the curtain, which could mean that it's actually not relevant and that we don't need to pay any attention to it. But it could mean that it comes back later and is important. And I don't think it's going to come back in this book. So it could be nothing at all. But, you know, maybe it'll come back in 4 books' time. Who knows? And now we enter the Vale. It's this huge, giant room, and I think incorrectly pictured it as a sort of like a beehive shape. But if the beehive was hollow and you were standing in the middle of it, there are balconies all the way around the outside, and these are all lit up with lovely colours because inside each balcony there are bowls full of glowing spheres of different colours. You remember the marbles with the jewels inside, and these are reading alcoves. And this whole room is the room that comes before the Pallanium, which seems to be a sort of a huge library, which is like the biggest, most well-stocked library pretty much in the world. And this is the reading room that people, you know, they take the books and they read them here after booking a private balcony, which seems to be an easy thing to do. There doesn't seem to be a lot of exclusivity or even privacy there, because Shallan is allowed to just go and sit in the one that Jasnar has booked and wait for her without, you know, that having to be cleared with her. It's possible that it might be quite easy to book yourself an actual balcony, even though it's actually really difficult to gain entry to the Pallanium itself, because that costs a lot of money, because there's a lot of, in fact, there's a quote about that. Where is it? It costs 1,000 sapphire bromes to buy a chit of admission to the library, and the explanation for this is the king's many hospitals require much upkeep. And yes, that's a thing. Do you remember the king of this place? He's a loved king, not a very clever king, but a nice and friendly one, and he's known for keeping all these hospitals. They have a lovely healthcare system here, and the king seems particularly keen on keeping that going. So good work. Kudos to that king. Suddenly she gets a memory that she is not comfortable with and that she tries to fight down and not remember. Nan Balat, bruised, his coat torn, a long silvery sword in her hand, sharp enough to cut stones as if they were water. That's a shard blade! She had a shard blade? And that's all we get of that memory, because she cuts it off. She does not allow herself to remember it, and that's going to be interesting in a minute. So here she is, waiting in this balcony for Jasnar to show up. She doesn't really want Jasnar to show up, because when she does, she'll be really angry with her and go, why haven't you gone away yet? I told you to go away, you should have gone away. What are you doing in my personal balcony? Doing a drawing? I told you I don't like those. And Jasnar, she's set up some spheres to light the place up in a bowl, like I said before, and she's got her doodle pad out, and she's started sketching. And at this point, we realise that, yes, I was right earlier about her memories. She is committing them to memory, like in a photographic way. And then we find out that what she's doing is she's sort of like offloading those memories, like almost like a printer. She's got these pictures in her head, and that, it doesn't cause her any distress, but when she's able to like let them out onto the page by sketching them, which she does almost in an unconscious way, it doesn't seem to be like she's got normal drawing skills that a normal artist has. It's almost like the bit in iRobot where he's scribbling out the image of his memory that he has, of his dream. It's like that. She's just sort of like blah, and then the perfect representation of the image that she captured in her memory is there on the page, and there's a certain amount of relief to that, as if, you know, it was taking up space in her soul, and now she's able to release it. There is clearly some sort of magic involved in her ability to take these memories and then draw them onto the page. And now I go back to why I said a moment ago that it's interesting that she cut off that earlier memory. Here we have a character whose superpower is memory. And yet she has this one memory that's clearly the most important memory she has, certainly the most interesting to us, and she won't have it. She won't have that memory. She tries to dismiss it. And in fact, it's causing her some distress. So maybe we're getting a hint here that if she would only draw that moment, you know, then she might feel better. I've got a cup of tea now. That's better. Okay, so now a chap called Brother Kabsal arrives, Kabsal, and he is an Ardent, but he appears to be not like other Ardents, because he's a bit silly, and he's got a sense of humour, and he talks about funny things. The first thing he does is be impressed with Shallan's drawing, and we get a little clue here as to the fact that it might be a magic sort of drawing ability. He asks her where she trained and how she learned, and it turns out her father had a book of instruction by a master of pencils named Dandos Heraldin the Oilsworn. In other words, she learned out of a book, which is amazing. You can't just be this good by learning out of a book. And when he expresses how impressed he is with that, she takes a little memory of him to be drawn later on. Now, in this world, when you draw something with pencils, what you do is you lacquer it so that it can't get smudged later on. This doesn't seem to be just something Shallan does, it's something everyone knows about. It's part of the world of sort of education and training that she comes from, you know, when people do things properly, the proper way. Well, when you make a pencil drawing, you lacquer it, and Brother Kabsal offers to do that. He's very good at it. At first she's a little bit, oh, hands off my drawing, but no, he's good at it. So Kabsal is our Ardent who's, you know, we're not all fusty old people. Some of us are young and fun. And he asked Shallan to pass on the message to Jasnar that he visited. Because what he wants to do is he wants to make the case for religion to Jasnar, who is an affirmed and famous atheist. So Kabsal's finished lacquering her drawing of Jasnar that she did a moment ago, which is really, really good, and it looks exactly like Jasnar in like an eerie way, where it's, you know, it's almost like it's her soul right there on the page. And he's about to nip off, but he asks her if there's anything she likes. And Shallan just sort of, out of the blue, says, I like jam? I like jam? And he goes, great. Jam then, and he disappears off. And Shallan wonders for a moment why he didn't wait for Jasnar to come back himself, instead of just say, tell her I've been here, and then disappear, but, you know, alright, fine, alright, okay, you know. Anyway, Shallan's written a letter to Jasnar, because her idea is, look, Jasnar likes logic, and one of the things that she demanded of Shallan is that she be good at writing. So Shallan thinks, alright, I shall write her a letter, in which I make my argument that she should still take me on as a ward, and I shall leave it here on the desk. So she does. She writes this letter, and the gist of the letter is, well, look, I may not have the education you want me to have, but the reason is because my dad is so bad-tempered, and this is the thing, this is focused on, that her dad was so bad-tempered that he basically chased away all the tutors she was ever supposed to have. And that's why she didn't learn everything, and what it means is that what she has learned, which is a great deal with just a couple of gaps in her education, all of that was something that she taught herself. She learned that herself by her own examination and reading and, you know, really striving to learn things, and so that should make her exactly the sort of person that Jasnar would enjoy teaching. So she's written this letter, she leaves it on the table, and then she stands to wait for Jasnar to arrive. And Jasnar does arrive, and she's cross. My response to this chapter. Well, there were some cocked eyebrows in this chapter, weren't there? There was a bit of banter back and forth between Shallan and Brother Kabsal, but it's the sort that could annoy me in some circumstances, but it was alright here. They constitute a very small percentage of the number of words I've been reading so far. I mean, look at how small the type is in this book. And how many pages remain in it. There's a lot of words here, and if a small percentage of them are delivered with a bit of a DreamWorks facial expression, well, never mind. And actually, it's interesting, I am now 145 pages into the book, and the last book I read, that was basically halfway through the book. So it's really interesting to me that it seems, even though it's taken me, you know, a long time to make these videos, when I was originally reading the book, it didn't seem to me as if it was weird that we're still setting up characters and we're at the very start of these characters' sort of, you know, journeys in the story. Something to do with the pacing of it. It hasn't felt boring, it's always felt interesting, but it feels completely natural that we would still be in the introductory phases of the story. And either that's tricky to pull off as a writer, or it's trickier to pull it off in a book where this is halfway through the book and you've had to cover, you know, not like the introductions in that much of the book and then setting up the story in this much of the book, and, you know, now you're on the home stretch, as it were. So not everyone will be comfortable with the pace and the scale of storytelling like this, but I was very excited. I was very, very interested in finding myself in a story on this scale, and it stuck with me. You know, this book hasn't made me feel like I can't read a book like this again. It's made me feel like I want to read a lot of books like this again. It hasn't felt slow, and in fact I'm wondering how, even though I've just read a couple of books that come under this description, and I'm reading one again now, it makes me wonder how books that are like of a normal length can move any faster than this one is without appearing sort of light and lacking and rushed. Now I noticed that Brandon's using Parshmen here in contrast to the previous chapter's Parshendi. The Parshendi aren't exactly the same as Parshmen, we're told, although we're told it by fallible narrators, but they are clearly the same race. And in the previous chapter they were fierce and frightening warriors, and here they're passive servants, and you sort of wonder what the difference is. Are they actually a different species, albeit visibly similar, or are they two different versions of the same species but essentially different things? Or is it just that the Alethi people kidnapped a load of these guys and trained them and made them be slaves and broke them? Spren details! As Shallan is drawing, she's surrounded by creation Spren, and we learn that Spren are always everywhere. They're not things, they don't come along when they're thing is happening. They're always everywhere, and they just sort of become visible. They just sort of pop into existence when the thing that they respond to is happening. So creation Spren are silver, about the length of a finger, but they shapeshift into just ideas, shapes they've recently seen, but they keep twisting and morphing and reforming in interesting ways. We learn about logic Spren, which are described as tiny little storm clouds that are attracted to great arguments. And Shallan has never seen them. Aww. We learn, or relearn, I can't remember if we learned it before, that Ardents are all shaven-headed and long-bearded and wear very, very basic robes. We heard that name Nan Balat, didn't we? Who's Nan Balat? Despite the term Nan, it isn't Shallan's Nan. It seems to be a man who, in her horrible memory, has a torn coat and is bruised, and she's there holding a shard blade. What are the Dawn Singers? Don't know, but they're from absolutely ages ago. The dawn of time, even. And you wonder if it's sort of the equivalent of, I don't know, you know, creator gods. But not the creator god, not the Almighty, because we learn the Almighty's name in this chapter, and it is, at least in one culture, Elithanalethi. No. Elithanalethi. No. Elithanathali, or He Who Transforms. Now this name, Elithanathali, is to be spoken only by Ardents. They're the only people who can say it out loud. Now, given that he's also known as He Who Transforms, this sort of throws the religious significance of soulcasters into sharp relief, doesn't it? Here we hear the phrase on Roshar. We've heard of Roshar before, but here we're on Roshar, which makes you think that Roshar must be the planet rather than, you know, the continent, although you could still say on Roshar if it was a continent. So don't know, but I think I've heard that it is the name of the planet. And there we have it. That's another chapter of The Way of Kings. Join me next time for another chapter of The Way of Kings. So bye! www.youtube.com/TeamTomato Dave.